But now the Russians began using motorcycles, and usually Russian motorcycles have possibilities to bypass or to outflank or to move through the edge positions of the armed force of Ukraine, to block the main supply lines, and then with the regular army to clear another defense layer of the armed force of Ukraine.
Et donc maintenant ils utilisent des motos pour aller plus vite et couper les lignes entre différentes troupes ukrainiennes sur le front.
Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Sumy direction. According to information we have, the Russians continued their offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Sumy, the capital of this oblast, and during the previous 24 hours the Russians managed to improve their positions. First, the Russians, according to information we have, established complete FPV drone control over the main supply lines between the city of Sumy and the north and the first defense layer. In this video, for example, on this map we can see lots of icons between the settlements of Khotin and Pisarevka. This is the video we're talking about. This video was published by the Russian sources, and in this video we can see how Russians were attacking equipment, vehicles, positions, cars, trucks, buildings, soldiers.
C'est très important cette image-là ou cette partie-là, puisque ça vient contredire la propagande habituelle de LCI et des anti-russes en Occident, qui à chaque fois ont comme seul argument la Russie sacrifie des soldats, envoie ses soldats à la mort ou quoi que ce soit, alors qu'ils ne comprennent pas que depuis 3 ans l'armée russe a profondément évolué, et donc maintenant on a une nouvelle séquence de progression. L'artillerie pylône, les drones contrôlent à peu près la zone ou disputent la zone avec les dronistes ukrainiens. Et une fois que ils ont établi l'avantage sur les dronistes ukrainiens, ou en tout cas une fois qu'ils ont l'avantage sur la zone avec leurs drones, là on a l'armée russe qui commence à avancer. Et l'armée russe n'avance pas avec des grosses concentrations de soldats, c'est des petits groupes de 5-6. Et donc le combat n'a plus rien à voir avec ce que eux ils pensent raconter sur LCI comme ils racontent d'habitude. Et donc c'est bien qu'on montre comment, avant même qu'on voit un seul soldat russe, on voit les Russes travailler méthodiquement à saper tout ce qui pourrait permettre à l'Ukraine d'avoir un avantage au niveau de ses drones ou de la communication ou de quoi que ce soit dans la zone. Comme vous avez vu, ils ont attaqué plusieurs antennes et plusieurs autres trucs avant même qu'on voit le moindre soldat sur le champ de bataille.
Armored vehicles, tanks in this area between the settlements of Khotin, Pisarevka and the city of Sumy. A lot of attacks, the Russians established complete control over this territory, and telling the truth, we believe that Ukrainians lost any possibilities to redeploy their units along N07 road in the direction of the first defense layer. So this road is no longer safe and secured for Ukrainians. Ukrainians basically can't use this road for different operations. Now the Ukrainians have just one possibility to go through the Sumy forest, but for some reason the Ukrainians are not using these roads. We don't know for sure why exactly. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Yunakievka, and the most.
Et donc là, vous avez bien compris que les Russes, ils ont pris le contrôle de la ligne de communication là, ici, qui ne laisse aucune autre alternative aux Ukrainiens qui sont là, ou je ne sais pas là, de rentrer, à part ce qui est de rentrer dans la forêt. Mais pour le moment, on n'a pas vu d'Ukrainiens utiliser cette route de retrait. En même temps, c'est normal. Si lui-même vient de dire que voilà, les Russes ont pris le contrôle au niveau des drones sur la route, pourquoi ils vont se mettre là? Donc il est possible qu'ils contournent, peut-être qu'ils viennent comme ça avant de rentrer. Bon, en tout cas, bon, on est une semaine après presque, ou plusieurs jours après que je vous ai fait la dernière revue de Military Summary, et on voit que du côté russe, les choses continuent d'avancer dans leur sens. Et je vous rappelle que c'est vers ici, là, que l'Ukraine avait fait ses attentats terroristes, justement pour couper les lignes d'approvisionnement, les lignes logistiques de la Russie et des Russes qui étaient là. Ça a marché un temps, puisque je me souviens que quand j'ai regardé des épisodes ou des publications de Military Summary avant ça, les Ukrainiens avaient fortement attaqué les Russes qui étaient ici. Mais depuis que la logistique et après qu'on a commencé à revenir pour les Russes, bah vous voyez de vous-même, on vous dit que voilà, les dronistes russes ont pris le contrôle ici et là, on va savoir ce qu'il en est.
Now the Ukrainians have just one possibility to go through the Sumy forest, but for some reason the Ukrainians are not using these roads. We don't know for sure why exactly. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Advifka. And the most important, this information was confirmed by pro-Ukrainian resources. And according to them, the Russians managed to cut N07 road and basically to outflank the settlement of Advifka from the west. So this is exactly what the Russians managed to managed to do during the previous 24 hours. And let's compare the maps between the dates. So right in front of your screens, you can see the situation by the end of the 9th of June of 2025. The settlement of Advifka was under complete Ukraine control, almost under complete control. And now we had reports that the Russians managed to outflank the settlement and to cut supply and support from the west and the southwest. Now the Ukrainians have possibilities to supply their forces in the area of Advifka just using this tree line in the direction of the settlement of Marina. So this is the only road left for the Ukrainians. But I'll remind you that during the previous days, we got lots of reports that the Russians were trying to outflank and to attack the settlement of Satki and the village of Advifka from the southeast. We are waiting for additional details during the next 24 hours, and obviously something huge might happen, and most likely the battle of Advifka is about to be finished. Obviously, we're not talking about days or hours, but obviously 1 week probably or 2 weeks, and the village will be taken by the Russians completely.
Donc, en résumé, comme d'habitude, nous avons encore une procédure d'encerclement des Russes. Et donc, c'est quasiment... Je pense qu'avant, les Russes ne maîtrisaient pas tout à fait eux-mêmes aussi le contournement des positions ukrainiennes. Mais depuis qu'ils ont pris l'avantage et l'assurance, et surtout ils ont amélioré tout ce qu'ils avaient amélioré, nous voyons que c'est à peu près la même procédure qu'ils réutilisent partout. Partout où les Ukrainiens se sont fortifiés et les attendent, ils préfèrent les contourner de gauche et de droite pour se retrouver dans leur dos et en tout cas d'éviter de se battre en venant comme ils faisaient avant. D'où le recul qu'il faut avoir avec la diffusion des nouvelles comme quoi les Russes tombent par milliers ou quoi que ce soit. Quand vous regardez les cartes, vous voyez bien que les Russes ne viennent plus de face à face. Il n'y a quasiment plus d'affrontements face à face. Les Russes, quand ils comprennent que les Ukrainiens les attendent, ils préfèrent les contourner et donc imposer des combats sur les flancs. Et ce qui leur permet de continuer à avancer et de continuer à grignoter du terrain aux Ukrainiens, comme on a vu de ce qui se passe au nord. Et donc les choses ont recommencé à repartir encore à faveur des Russes après qu'il y ait eu ces attentats en Russie et la rupture de la logistique.
Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the South Donetsk and the Dnipro directions, because during the previous night we got lots of very important updates from this area. And first let's talk about the settlement of Novo-Nikolaevka. During the previous night, the pro-Ukrainian resources published this video, how Ukrainians were attacking Russians, how the Russians were attacking Ukrainian positions. Now, you know that now the Russians began using motorcycles massively. And this is very interesting tactics, because you know that Ukrainians have no possibilities to keep lots of forces along the line of combat contact. Usually the Ukrainians keep just several soldiers, few groups along the line of combat contact, and the main forces are located several kilometers from the line of combat contact. And when Ukrainians see the movement of the Russian forces, the Ukrainians usually send reinforcements and reserves with the purpose to stabilize the situation. But now the Russians began using motorcycles, and usually Russian motorcycles have possibilities to bypass pass or to outflank or to move through the edge positions of the armored forces of Ukraine, to block the main supply lines, and then with the regular army to clear another defense layer of the armored forces of Ukraine. So this is the tactics of the Russians. The Russians use these tactics in the area of Novomikhailivka.
Ça, c'est quelque chose de nouveau. Bah, pour les anglophones, vous avez compris. Pour le reste, les Ukrainiens n'ont pas assez d'hommes pour couvrir toute la ligne de front. Et donc, ils sont par petits groupes séparés de plusieurs kilomètres. Et les Russes ont compris qu'il y a des trous entre les différentes troupes ukrainiennes sur le front. Et donc, maintenant, ils utilisent des motos pour aller plus vite et couper les lignes entre différentes troupes ukrainiennes sur le front. Et apparemment ça marche, en tout cas on va voir. Hein. C'est la tactique en tout cas qu'ils ont utilisée ici. Et moi c'est la première fois que je vois depuis que je suis ce conflit. J'avais compris qu'ils utilisaient des quads et tout ça pour gagner en mobilité, mais j'avais pas compris qu'ils avaient commencé aussi à mettre une stratégie en place pour en fait isoler les différentes troupes ukrainiennes sur le front.
We got video proof of this. The Russians several days ago used the same tactics in the vicinity of Alexandra Kalinova. First, motorcycles using very high speed entered the village, and then the Russians began securing the territory and the gap between positions in Alexandra Kalinova in the settlement of Zarya. And the Russians used the same tactics in the northwestern part of the city of Toretsk when the Russian motorcycles entered the village of Nilipovka. Very interesting tactics, and we see that these tactics works. Anyway, let's return back.
Et donc, ils vous ont montré que voilà, cette tactique n'a pas été utilisée que là-bas. Il a été aussi utilisé dans les deux endroits supplémentaires qu'il a montré là.
Based on this video, we have adjusted the map. We have colored everything behind a Russian motorcycle offensive operation. We don't know for sure the status of these three lines. Most likely they were Ukrainians during the Russian attack, but obviously during the next 24-48 hours, while the Russian forces are located in this part of Nikolaevka, the regular army of the Russian Federation will continue offensive operation with the purpose to secure the gap between positions. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Novopavlovka, in the South Donetsk direction, in the Kamar area. The most important and the most interesting updates are coming from the settlement by the name of Alexeyevka. Today Russian sources published this video, and this is very important video, and in this video we can see how Russian 114th Brigade was attacking and clearing positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in the area of the settlement by the name of Alexeyevka. This video has 2.5 minutes, and in this video we can see lots of episodes of clashes for these territories, lots of episodes with Ukrainian losses, and in the most final part of this video we can see how a Russian drone was flying above the village and making video of the situation on the ground. And in the most final part of this video we can see how Russians from the 114th Brigade established different signs of their unit in different parts of the settlement of Alexeyevka. So according to this final scene, the Russians managed to establish their flags in the eastern, central and the western part of the settlement, and during the video we got those episodes, but different probably independent resources managed to gelocate just two flags. This is the area of the first flag that was raised by the Russians, and this is the area of the second flag. Based on this video we have colored completely the eastern and the central parts of the settlement of Alexeyevka, and the northern part was also colored in Russian favor according to neutral mappers. But several pro-Russian resources reported that the entire village of Alexeyevka was secured and captured by the Russians, and that the Ukrainians were forced to fall back completely. So, summarizing everything, according to several resources, independent resources, pro-Russian resources, pro-Ukrainian resources, and neutral mappers, the Russians, by the beginning of the 10th of June of 2025, managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Alexeyevka. Today we are waiting for additional report from the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. Maybe they will confirm this information, and if they confirm this information, we will color this territory completely in Russian favor. So another stronghold of the armored forces of Ukraine was taken by the Russians, and the most important, this stronghold was taken by the Russians from the 114th Brigade, which most likely was somewhere on restoring their combat capabilities after their military trip from the city of Advifka in the direction of the settlement of Pokrovsk. I'll remind you that most of these settlements, villages and towns were taken by the 114th Brigade of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation during the period of time between probably April of 2025 and probably September or October of 2024. So between April and October of 2024, the Russians managed, of 114th Brigade, managed to secure every single village in this direction. Then this brigade was sent probably to replacements to restore their combat capabilities, and now we see that the Russians returned this brigade back to the Pokrovsk and to the Dnipro direction, which means that the Russians are planning to intensify their offensive with fresh forces and with...
Le truc à comprendre, c'est pourquoi il a insisté pour montrer cette séquence. C'était pour montrer comment les Russes ont pris le contrôle de cette zone-là, je ne sais plus comment ça s'appelle, et comment ils ont défendu, ou en tout cas ils se sont battus successivement dans différents points pour prendre cette zone. Et le plus important, il dit, la brigade qui a pris cette zone, c'était la brigade qui était là à l'époque où je crois qu'ils ont pris Advifka. Ils ont fait beaucoup de progrès. Cette brigade avait subi beaucoup de pertes ou beaucoup de dégâts ou était fatiguée. On les avait retirés, on les avait envoyés en retrait du front. Et là, on les a restaurés. On a restauré cette brigade, donc probablement les gens ont récupéré. On a rajouté des recrues pour refaire la brigade. Et cette brigade, elle est revenue. Et c'est elle qui vient de prendre cette ville. Et donc, le retour de cette unité signe probablement le retour en force et peut-être le projet de avancer la ligne de front de ce côté-ci plus vers Dnipro, parce que là on est en train d'arriver aux frontières de Donbass ou de Donetsk pour rentrer vers l'autre région où j'avais dit que ça va être catastrophique si les Russes arrivent à passer les dernières lignes de fortifications ukrainiennes, et c'est ce qui est en train de se passer.
Very experienced brigade, which most likely will be able to secure the rest of the Donetsk region, at least in this area. Furthermore, currently there are very heavy clashes for the settlement of Kamar. The Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their positions in the area. Let's compare the map between the dates. This is the situation by the end of the 9th of June, and this is the situation by the beginning. According to information we have, the Russians managed to secure these farms and these barracks in the southeastern part of the settlement. The Ukrainians are trying to stick and stay as close as possible to the river of Mokre Yali with the purpose to have enough of time to cross the river and to escape possible cauldron that the Russians are trying to create for the Ukrainians. We believe that the battle for Kamar is coming to an end because we don't see any chances for the Ukrainians to hold their positions. Now let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction where the Russians continue their offensive operation. During the previous night we got additional videos how the Russians were bombing and attacking Ukrainians in this area. I would like to point your attention that the settlement of Gulai Pole is also in the area of responsibilities of the Russian Group of Forces East. So the Group of Forces East currently attacks on the line between the settlement of Gulai Pole and the settlement of Alexeyevka. So this big front line is under the responsibilities of this very experienced group of forces. And today pro-Ukrainian sources confirmed that the Russians indeed during the previous days managed to shorten the distance to the settlements and villages of Malinovka and Chervona. And according to pro-Ukrainian sources and according to their gray zone and contested area, the Russians the first groups of the Russian forces managed to answer the village of Malinovka from the southeast. So according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the battle for this village has probably begun several days ago, and the Russians continue their offensive operation. This is...
En tout cas, moi ce que je retiens, c'est que les Russes sont en train de gagner encore ou d'avancer partout. Et ce que je voulais savoir, c'était s'ils avaient franchi le Dniepr ou pas, s'ils étaient rentrés dans le Dnipro ou pas. Donc je ne sais pas s'il y a
Very important village because
avant
we
la fin de cette vidéo, mais je pense que dans la truc d'avant, il y a quelque chose qui est dit pour ça.
expect that the Russians will continue further in the northern direction towards the settlement of Uspienovka from the south and from the east with the purpose to take this village under complete control, which will open the Russians a window of opportunities to continue offensive operation with the purpose to establish complete control over the settlement of Gulyai-Polye, which can lead to complete collapse of Ukrainian defense on the entire Zaporozhye and Dnipro directions.
Si les Russes arrivent à concrétiser leur avancée ici, ça devrait forcer l'effondrement de toute cette zone. Donc nous verrons bien. Pour ce qui est de military summary et de la situation du front au 10 juin 18h, nous avons vu. Une excellente soirée. Peace out.